Hello and welcome to High Fell. Today let's have a look at the railway in its room, in its setting. A few people ask how big it is, etc. So it's just about 3.8 meters, I think it is, sort of this length on here. Slightly shorter on this side because we've got a door to fit in. So it's a fairly average spare bedroom size, and this is the real advantage of TT120. You can get quite a lot in a space, which means you have the opportunity of developing quite a decent layout, I think. So what I'm going to do today is going to have a little look at some of the details and features on the layout. There's been a few additions. Also, at the moment, I'm still in my 1980s phase, so we've got a lot of blue diesels running. Really enjoying that. At some point, we'll go back to the steamers, possibly when the J50 comes from Hornby, or maybe a bit before then, who knows. Also, a few additions as well in terms of rolling stock, so we'll have a look at some of the locos and just generally have a little bit more of a running session and look at some of the close-up details that have been added for those who haven't really caught up. Okay, so let's get into it. Starting with some of the locos that I'm running currently. So I've pitched this around about sometime in the 1980s, so a lot of blue locos, but you notice this is the black 08. So this is one that's going to suit between my steam running era and all diesel. There were a few 08s that famously managed to escape the painter's brush and still ran in early BR liveries, even with early logos on as well. So that means I don't need to repaint anymore. So this started out as the original blue 08 and I painted it black and added the logo on it. To make it run in DCC, I fitted a Zimo decoder and a Stay Alive, and that's running a Digitrains sound profile, which really is fantastic. This has got the standard motor in, and at the moment we're on speed step 3. If I knock it down to 1, and the beauty of these are that you can also add real braking. So your number 2 key is actually your brake. I'm just going to move the camera a bit there. So that is still just the same moving. It's incredible. So the motor itself, apart from the fact that some of these motors do like to go south, actually does run rather well. And so far these are standing up brilliantly. I have 2 running this sound profile, and then of course I've got one where I changed to the This Way Works motor, which meant I could use the HM 7000 decoder in. And whilst the Digitrain system is brilliant, it is twice the price. So you know, you've got to cut your cloth accordingly. Next up, a Class 50. So these were the Hornby ones that were released as Leviathan in large logo blue. I have 2 of these, and both have been renumbered and renamed. So this is 20, which is Revenge. Of course, the Class 50's all been named after warships. And the sister loco that I run is 34, which is Furious. Furious and Revenge, they look like a pair that had to go hand in hand on the layout. So really enjoy running these. Super powerful and very reliable. These have been good. One of these I actually picked up second hand. Somebody had been messing around with it and made a right pig's ear of running it. It was full of, well, they'd used chinchilla sand and they hadn't glued it down, and all of the gearbox was full of that. There was static grass all around, splattered on the inside. There were a couple of other things. Stripped it all down, got it all working. So £55 later, and superb loco. Really pleased with these. Well, for me, one of the standout locomotives of the British Rail and since eras, as always been the HST. So in 1978, this was the first train I got as my own train set. And I used to go and sit on the side of the East Coast main line just outside of Thirsk and watch these at full tilt. And it might have said 125 on the side, but these were usually doing way more than that down there. So somehow I had to incorporate these into the layout, which I have. And I actually got a pair. So we've got this one in the original and, in my view, the best livery. And we've got a decent rake. You'll notice all the coaches have been illuminated as well. Also, I've painted all the interiors. Sorry for the shaky camera on there. And so the next stage for these will be to put some passengers in. I have got some various packs of seated passengers. Sometimes one of the problems is you do need to be a bit of a surgeon, because you do need to do some leg chopping to get them in. So we'll see how that goes with these. The other HST that I have, and to be honest with you, I just couldn't resist this one. It was at a point where there was an incredible bargain going on, and I picked up an executive one, fully sound fitted, for very, very little money, brand new. So again, there are bargains out there. I know a lot of people say that it's expensive because all the models are new, everything's brand new tooling, but if you're prepared to have a little bit of patience and just keep looking around, you can pick up bargains. This is another of the Zimo and Digitrains fitted 08s. This one is in its original blue, but I have weathered it. And this one has actually had its horn switched to the hooter sound. And this is my third shunter. Now, this one started life out as a DB red shunter. It actually came to me as a box of very sorry looking bits. Somebody had been, again, messing around, and it had not gone well. And this loco has actually gained the name Frankie the Frankenshunter, because it is a combination of all sorts of bits and pieces of spares that are put together to make it into a workable loco. A lot of surgery had to go on, and so this is the one that starred in the motor transfer. So this is the one that's got the This Way Works motor in it, and also the Next 18 decoder with the adapter plate on. So that's how you can get your Bluetooth and sound fitting into an 08. You don't need to take the cab off. This is a loco that sort of was on the operating table for so long, and it's proved to be an extremely valuable part of the fleet, and I'm really pleased with the way it works. The sound profile is brilliant. Running is superb. If you look closely, you will see the brake rigging has been removed on this, and the problem that I found with this particular loco was that somewhere along the line, either something through manufacturing or whether it was through the various trials and tribulations it went through, the chassis was slightly distorted, and trying to, I couldn't get the chassis to do anything. So the only thing was to remove all the brake rigging, so at least that meant that when the loco was running, it wasn't keep catching on everything. I think perhaps it was a little bit of mishandling and misuse with it, because there were so many other things that were damaged. But that's Frankie. So he trundles up and round, and it's the paint job's come out quite well. Quite pleased with that. That's just using rail match blue, and so there we are. These two blue shunters, they tend to inhabit the docks, and so between them we can just about operate any combination of moving stuff around. That's all good fun. So let's have a look and see what else we've got. A class 25, and of course this one is Basil. Faulty Tower fans will know that Basil was the name of the Siberian hamster that Manuel bought, which of course was a rat. Class 25 is known as a rat because it was everywhere on the network, and these are actually a brilliant model. I really hope that Hornby are working to get some mid-range locos both in steam and diesel out, because they're such good do-it-all locos. We're really well looked after with some of the big bruisers like express trains and things like that, and also we've got things like the 08s, which are fantastic, J50 on its way. But these mid-range locos, I think, are really going to open up the scale, because they're just going to suit so many applications, no matter what size layout you're running. So this is actually built from a Class 43 chassis. So I picked one of these up just over a year ago, or not even that long actually, when there was lots of sales going on and somebody was offering a brand new GWR 43 with decoders, and I'm not going to tell you how much it was, but it was a steal at that price. So that was purchased, the bodies were sold off, and then the Dremel came out. The body for the 25 comes from Lincoln Locos, so if you are thinking of doing any conversions and building stuff, go and check on their website because they've got loads of options. They do stuff in TT3, which is the old try and 3mm to 1 foot scale, but they will also offer it in 2.54mm to the foot, which is TT120, the correct size scale. Brilliant stuff that they do. Super fine printing. Very pleased with this, and it's come out really well. And my loco building skills, I haven't built many locos, and so for it to come out this well, I think is testament to how good the parts are that were used rather than anything that I did. Adding a few extra details, so the windows are actually from glue and glaze. I think that really just finishes off a loco, and the handrails, believe it or not, are the legs off resistors. So when you get that big long extra lump on the end of a resistor, cut those off and they're dead easy to bend. A couple of little fine holes in, and away you go. And then a very good friend of mine printed up a very convincing battery fuel tank for underneath. And if I had one thing to say to Lincoln Locos, please print the tanks and the battery boxes. They do all things like the buffers, which are really good, and the side frames for the bogies, but for the moment, for some reason, they don't do that bit, and it would just really, I think, help modelers with their conversions. It's actually quite an easy thing to do. It runs a Class 31 sound profile from Hornby, and because it was a double O gauge one, what I've done is run it, and then, as you know, I like to recalibrate my models anyway after the motors have run in, but recalibration, and this works perfectly, and it's a really good performer because it's actually got that all-wheel drive and quite a lot of weight to it. This thing can pull just like a Class 50 or a 43. It's really good performer, and it's really useful in the layout. It can be put to all sorts. You can see I've weathered it, used some Railtap decals, and all in all, very pleased with the way that Basil's come out. And you always find something to be doing. And the very latest addition to the fleet is a Class 66. Now, before anybody says, hang on a minute, they weren't around in the 1980s, well, we know that. But GBRF did this fantastic tribute British Rail commemoration large logo livery on one of their locos. That's the one that Hornby, or one of the ones that Hornby has chosen to issue in this first batch of 66s. And to be honest with you, I think I think it's quite a convincing loco. It has got that shape of early diesels. I mean, there's not really that much you can do with the diesel, I suppose. The livery looks good. I'm in two minds whether to remove the GBRF livery naming and the plate off it, so it makes it look a little bit more nondescript. We haven't got a huge choice of locos, and to be honest with you, if it bothers you, well, it bothers you. It doesn't bother me, and I think it's a great loco. Had a couple of little fettling jobs to do on this one, which have fed back to Hornby Towers. But fortunately, I think a lot of people finding theirs are running really well. And again, I think it's going to be the basis of some great layouts with these. The HAA wagons, something I wasn't originally going to get. So a friend of mine set me up and bought me two for my birthday. And I'm sure, I swear he did it knowing full well that I can't just have two of something. I've got to have, you know, a sizable rake of a particular type of thing if you're doing these. And so I've ended up spending all my pocket money on these. I have weathered them, been looking at quite a lot of library photos, plus I do remember from the time in the area where the merry-go-round trains were running as well. Something that people might not necessarily be aware unless you do a bit of research or you happen to know is that the merry-go wagons, these HAA wagons, were primarily there to move pulverized coal. So there's a lot of very dirty coal dust floating around with these anyway, and they were automatically filled, automatic unfilling. these trains almost never stopped. I think the only time they ever stopped was for fueling and for servicing, where they'd obviously swap a loco out. Even things like crew changes were done on the move. So the look I've gone for, and it's my first experiment on an actual model with an airbrush. So I've got myself a new airbrush setup and playing around with that, and I'm really quite pleased with the way these have come out. I'll see if I can drop this down, if we can get a little bit of a close-up as these go by, and then we'll just generally have some other trains running. So nice and grubby. I've also removed the hoods. The plan is I'll do a coal load for these, and I'll make them like I did with my 21-ton coal wagons. I'll make those removable and using the magnet on them. Okay, let's see what else we can have running. Here's Furious heading away. A couple of BR Mark 1s. Now you'll notice they're in blue and grey, which is not available. Yes, you guessed it, these are repainted. It's actually not such a difficult job to do. I've done a video on that. We've got some of the Arnold ferry vans, and following up the rear, we've got an all blue XLMS full brake, so that's been converted to a parcels. Just going to bring the camera up a bit so you can get a bit more of a shot round. So doing the XLMS, it literally was one of the LMS livery, 50-foot Stania, full brakes, and made a few changes. The hardest thing of doing this conversion is getting the body off. Once you've got your fingernails in and releasing it from the chassis, it's quite an easy job. Fortunately, the glazing's not on too tight on these, so you can pop that off without it shattering into a million pieces, which is something I found when I had to go on a Pullman for somebody to repaint. That was quite hard to do. The other thing I did was a little bit of research on these. They were run by British Rail in blue and also blue grey, so the same livery as the coaches that are running at the moment. Now, traditionally, I always thought that they only ever ran in plain blue, so yeah, I was wrong. Also, another little modification they made, and I'll try and see if I can get the camera down as this one goes by and see whether we can catch that. I also removed the footsteps, which you won't be able to see, but also I've removed the gangway door as well, because British Rail went through a process of plating those over. I think it was mainly a combination of security and also the fact that those 50-foot or the Stania coaches generally didn't marry up to Mark 1 stock and things like that. So that was that. And as it comes around for another loop, something you might notice is the close coupling between the two Mark 1 coaches. So that I found, and a friend have found a French chap that TJ models that do a whole range of magnetic couplings, primarily for N gauge, but because N gauge uses and TT uses the same NEM socket, oh, that's lovely and close. You can get in quarter of a millimeter increments any length shank you want on these twin magnet couplings, and they look superb, close coupled. It's kind of sold the Mark 1s to me. When these first came out, I was absolutely taken aback with these, because I remember the old Triang and the Hornby Mark 1s in 00, and you see what they've delivered in TT 120. I mean, these just run so superbly. We'll have this rather nice viaduct shot. And again, these Mark 1s, I've painted the interiors, they're fully illuminated, and these do have a complement of passengers in them as well. So here we've got our mixed passenger and parcels freight coming in, and technically it's coming in what looks like platform 1, but it's actually platform 2, and that's all part of the entirely fictitious history of High Fell, and I'll show you how that came into being. If you're going to have a story, you've got to have a backstory to the backstory. Okay, so there we go. Just have a bit of a close-up on the back of this parcels van so you can see how that, in actual fact, you could use a piece of plastic card. So the rear gangway, they unclip. There's a little tiny couple of spots of glue on there. They unclip quite easily. A craft knife can remove the steps. I think the steps up the side, that was part of a plan because of obviously increasing use of overhead power lines, things like that. Obviously, you've got the overhead power flashes as well, which was something that came in through the BR era as well. But that piece on there is not plastic card. It was actually a piece of packing off. I think it was actually off a decoder box or something like that. That sort of fairly firm but thin plastic. Cut it the right size, stuck it on, painted it all over. Quite nice. I've also added some illumination as well. Just move this back. Now I've used the little micro lights that you can get from Tramfabrique, because on a lot of the coaches now I've converted them from battery through to mains power, simply because I was starting to get so many coaches, and that's a lot of batteries, a lot of holders, but also quite a lot of the reed switches, and it adds up. But going to mains power, if you want to do it, is a little bit more involved. It's not that hard, but it does save money in the end. So I've used a battery powered one on this parcels coach on the basis that I don't have many, and also the underframe detail on these bogies is quite complex, and when you see the way that I incorporate the pickups, it's just easier to put the battery on. Plus also, I don't think that a parcels coach would have the lights on all the time, whereas obviously coaches do. So that's just again acted with a little magnetic switch. I'll do a bit of handheld camera here because we might be able to pick this up. So I have fitted some tail lights on the Mark II coaches, because obviously the brakes go out the end, and I've also added some brake lights. Now you can get some really nicely printed lamps from This Way Works. Richard does those on his website, and coloured lights depending on what colour you want to do. And the great thing is the lights, he prints them with a hole in, so that the illumination comes through nicely there. And these actually use a reed switch, so I had obviously a pile of reed switches left over from when I changed lighting to mains power. In fact, I'll show you how I've done this on the bogies. So these spring contacts, you use for TT120, you use the 1.5mm ones, which are also listed for N, because they use oversized axles. And you can see, dead easy job. Overlay them, little loop of wire, little dab of solder. These are gold plated, so they solder like a dream. You do one polarity on one bogie, opposite on the other. And then these also have decoders, not decoders, they have capacitors and resistors in. So resistors, you can set those so that you get the right brightness of light, the right kind of hue. Older stock tends to be quite yellowy, more modern stuff tends to be a bit brighter. And then the capacitors just help ensure that if the coach goes over a little bit of a poor contact somewhere, that the lights don't flicker. They also run a full bridge rectifier, so it'll turn the DCC alternating current on the track to a DC for the LEDs. Okay, right. I said I was going to explain about platforms and platform ones. So something that I don't really show, I don't think that often, is just in this corner we have a disused tunnel. And way back in the 1800s, when railways started becoming prevalent across the country, the viaduct was built. So the premise is that High Fell is quite a high level station, and that the line climbs all the way from Durham and it pops out of this tunnel here, or rather did, and made its way across the valley through the viaduct and looping round, and this is how it gains the gradient that it needs through Crag Edge, which is where the cutting is, and then it would arrive here at Highfell, which was at the time a terminus station. Now it's still a terminus station, but as things developed, an extra line was put through, and that's this double line. And so rather than from the signal box, the line heading down here and being at this point where platform 1 would have been, platform 1 was knocked down, these extra lines were put in, there's other lines on the other side as well, new tunnels through Telegraph Hill, and I thought it'd be fun. So where the earth and everything like that was disturbed, we've got more growth and things like that, bits and pieces coming up, and the ballast is a different colour because it's been replaced. It's different, slightly different shades, so that just really adds some extra details that you wouldn't necessarily always think of putting on the layout. So here's Basil the 25 trundling along with a set of van fits. And what we're going to do is, whilst he's making his way around, try and focus in on a few of the details. Well, we'll start actually over here at the signal box. So added a few extra little bits and pieces. And if you look carefully, there is Gresley, the cat, keeping an eye on various things. And if we scuttle all the way down to the station, over down here, you'll find his brother, Nigel. That's a great thing with having these models. You can just let your imagination go completely mad. If you look through in the station building, you can see there is a map up on the wall. It's actually not that easy to see, but you might be able to tell there's some seating being added. There is actually a ladies' waiting room and bits and pieces in there. I opened up the door on this and added some lighting, and the interior was inspired by the station building, which is up at Beamish, which is not very far from me. It's only about 3 miles up a little bike path. And that originally came from Rowley, which is up along towards the up into the sort of the foothills of the Pennines, just along a bit further up the line. May have covered this one before. So this is the transmitter station. So in the area where I live, up here in County Durham, everyone will know that Pontop Pike is where your TV signal comes from. Certainly when you're a kid, it seemed to be very important to know where to point the aerial to. Well, this is not a TV transmitter, because I also found a lot of these transmitter stations also had these microwave horns fitted during the 50s and 60s, allegedly to make TV signals better. I'm not so sure if it's not something to do with the fact that there always used to be a few military personnel around, but anyway, who knows. So I call this Telegraph Hill because partly the reason was while I was making it, I was listening to some tunes, and one of my favourites, Dire Straits, Telegraph Road was on. I thought, oh, that's an interesting name for a hill. And then we've got the source of the Twizzle, which it sounds like a made-up name, but it actually is a real stream and river as it develops through the dale where I live. And that comes down and that pours into this tarn here. Now, I know I have a few aircraft enthusiasts who are subscribers on the channel, and of course the 1980s would have meant that the hunters that normally were grazing the skies would have been long since gone, but we've now renewed those with a pair of Harriers. Before anybody points out, these are actually Harrier 2s, which didn't think come into service till the early 90s, possibly the very late 80s. So a little bit new, but on the other hand, the alternative was some American Air Force Phantoms, and I thought actually I'd rather have newer Harriers than Phantoms. So there we go. That's a little bit of fun. If anybody wonders how they actually hang there, it's off fishing line, and they're just on sort of cardboard box. So they are movable. I haven't quite worked out how to make anything where it might look convincing for them to move. I don't think it would match the level of Thunderbirds, put it that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a light up so we can get in a little bit more, and we'll have a look at Glebe Farm and some of the details in there. So just actually turning this train now via the reverse loop, which of course sits across the viaduct. And whilst Basil there sits waiting to get the go, we can dip into what's going on Glebe Farm. So actually I call this Glebe Farm after my friend's farm, where I spent up many hours, in fact probably many years of my childhood working. So this is the Metcalf kit, and I built it on a board and then added it to the layout so that you can get a lot of detail in. And one of the fun things is you can put detail in you can't necessarily see very easily. So when you get a different view of it, you get to see things that people don't always see. So we've got various bits of machinery added in there. And then we've got a little bit of a lean-to type building on the end. And added a garden. So we've got some potatoes growing. Someone's been digging up. There's a fork dug in the ground there, along with a rake. And looks like Mrs. Farmer is there. And if we actually look around the side, my goodness, a naughty spaniel is getting into the dustbin by the looks of things. So might be a bit of shouting going on later. And then we've got a tree growing up the back. And we've got various outhouses. I think one of the things that I did to these models, which I think just really kind of adds something extra as well, not just lighting, but also drain pipes. And in my childish Blue Peter desire to make from what's available, yep, they are made from pieces of spaghetti. I've also illuminated the shed as well. It doesn't really show always on the videos, but it's quite a nice, pleasing, dull light, the sort of thing where a farmer's put a light in, but he ain't going to spend too much money in putting a very big bulb in it. So a few flowers out to the front, and then this is the road that leads winding back up past the church and to the level crossing just at the back of the goods station. So it really is the kind of idea that the buildings have been here for quite a long time, and then the railway, although it came along in the 1800s, cut straight through, and so you've divided it. Then we have another place I used to spend quite a lot of time. In actual fact, I mean, this is Paradise Cottage. So my friend's cousins had Paradise Farm. I used to go camping up there, go off on my own sort of walking and camping. So they've got a shout out there. We've got a couple of fruit trees in the back. We've got various vegetables growing in the back, typical of a farmer's or a cottage. We just lost a bit of sound there. Whoop, we're back again. And you can see minimal amount of areas given over to the cottage, because it's obviously everything's all about farmland. And there's my homemade stone walls, which are made from cork underlay scraps. And we've got a track down the side which kind of dissipates just here. There is a plan. There is a little bit more of a substantial track going in and into the woods, and that's going to feature on a forthcoming little bit of a scene. Now there is a little path that makes its way up the embankment here, and it is a shortcut. So I can imagine the children from the farm scurrying up the bank there along the side, and there is a break in the wall just in the corner where there's a few stones down, and they'll scrabble past that tree. It saves them to walk the long way around on the road. St. Anne's Church. Few graves in there. I've got some more gravestones to go. Otherwise, at the moment, it looks like no one's ever died at Highfell, and I'm sure they probably have. Then we get to Crag Edge, and you can see the railway line has cut through. And in my head, the reason why this actually drops to single track is this was such an awkward and expensive piece of excavation that even when the double track was added, nobody wanted to foot the bill for that. Also, we have the junction here, which takes the line away to my version of Tyne Dock. So there's various bits and pieces still to add. I'm sure anybody that's got a layout realises it's never done, because you always look at details. You either want to change stuff or you think, oh, I could add something else there. Down in the goods yard, we have the goods shed. That is illuminated. I've also added a platform in there. I also added some exterior lighting. That was actually inspired by Model Loco, Andy, when he was putting some exterior lights on. I thought, wow, that looks good. So I stole his idea for that. I made myself a little loading platform here. And there's various bits and pieces on there. And then we've got the ubiquitous workers' cottages. These probably would be railway workers, I think. And if we look down inside, we can see there's the dustbin. The bin then must have been, because all the bins are empty. But there's a cat patrolling at the top. And then we have a collection of the local dogs all having a bit of a chat, wondering what they can run after next. Again, these buildings are illuminated. And I also got some 3D printed chimney pots, which I think are just that little bit nicer than the ones. I mean, the Metcalfe stuff is brilliant, but when it comes to chimneys, that's, I think, as far as you can go with card. And some mad person, they must be completely bonkers. They bought a VW variant. What on earth were they thinking? Volkswagen, hey? Well, that'll never catch on. Anyway, let's now move on and have a look through the docks. I'm going to take this in because this is actually, for me, an indication that what you don't think is ever going to come to anything much can actually end up being something that you really like. So this area here was never going to be anything in particular. It literally is just linking the main part of the layout. And if I whip the camera out here, you can see that we have the junction over here. What I've done is I've sealed, or just put a flap across here, and that's just to keep the light out, so it makes the tunnel areas look a little bit more convincing. And then this gradually developed to something a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to. So the idea of this double arch bridge is inspired by the Tyne Dock arches, which I think there are still some bits and pieces left, but there's plenty of photos. It's a very iconic shot of the approach in. It's also something that was repeated at Sunderland as well, this double arch idea to get the height so that stuff would span over the city and then across to the dock areas. Always reminds me of Roman aqueducts and things like that. It's actually using the old viaduct. So before I extended Highfell, it had a brick viaduct. And of course, you never throw anything away. I kept it thinking I'll find a use for it. And then when the dock scene came into existence, I found a use for it. And so, like any kind of arch area, particularly in an industrial area, you're almost certain to get some form of dump and tip. So this has got various detritus that's been hiked over the edge here. Various bits of vegetation. We've got flowers and things like growing up there. You've got a puddle. One of these really nice braziers burning away. dog poo bags, the little cardboard rolls that come in the inside. Those have been repurposed and painted. That's paint, not dog poo, before you worry. And then a little bit of weathering to simulate rust that started to appear on there. And then we've got the typical 1960s style tower blocks. Again, those are based on actual tower blocks, particularly for the colouring and things like that, of ones that were in Newcastle. And for a little bit of humour, it's the tower blocks. One's called Ant, one's called Deck. Nobody can tell which one's which. It could be Deck, it could be Ant, who knows? And then we're moving along. And in keeping with the 1960s housing development, it's built overlooking a tip or a scrapyard. We've got a petrochemical filling facility here. We've got the Thunberg petrochemical plant here. God knows what horrific filth that they pump out into the atmosphere. And of course, you've got a busy railway line and a dock. So, of course, town planners thought, yeah, people would want to live there, wouldn't they? So, there we go. Now, I had a little bit of fun. I actually really like anything where trains go underneath structures. There's just something appealing about it, and everybody does bridges and tunnels and things like that. But when you get to industrial areas, I always think there's a lot of scope for things like this, which is just like a gantry, which is leading pipe work across. And that's obviously pulling in some oil-based materials over to the works. And then we've got this oil facility, and Ladderman was busy with his 3D printer, and he got the setting wrong, and he made stuff too small. I don't think Double O Dave was very happy about it. So anyway, I've had to pay Double O Dave for these. It cost me quite a lot of money, but apparently I owed him some money for some barrels of custard. I don't know, I'm not really sure about that. So various bits and pieces on there as we move along. Again, another gantry construction, this time signal box. And again, I think stuff like this, for me, it just tells the story of everything's space is at a premium, so the railways went up. So I made a gantry. This is all detailed inside. It's quite nice to do those little bits and pieces, and when people can't see them, you can delight them by showing bits and pieces. This is really a lot of kit bashing and just made up stuff. So that walkway is from an N gauge footbridge, which was completely and utterly unsuccessful as a footbridge, but I kept all the bits and pieces. We got the smoke deflectors are just made from card, a little bit of tube, which is for the water and toilet supply from there, which actually that contains the cabling for the light in there. This open grid is actually some laser cut ply grids and bits and pieces, and then there was a single box detailing kit which I came across for a couple of quid. So that's all been added into there. So we have the SO fueling site. So this is where all the wagons come to be fueled. Ships must be, or a pipeline must be bringing fuel in or oil, and then it's decanted off into the wagons. Again, a few extra bits and pieces added in here, and it is all illuminated. Let's see if we can get that down into here. You can see a couple of forklift trucks. Also, you'll notice this is actually done in like a head shunt format. So a train has to come in, and there just isn't enough room in these roads for a full length oil train to come in with its locomotive on. So what has to happen is it has to be uncoupled, and some of it has to be pushed back into the head shunt siding, and then other parts of it are pushed through. Shunters then pull the wagons through as they're all filled, and then a new train is reassembled. by making it not just a straight in and out, adds a lot more operational interest to it. Stuff when it's a little bit more awkward is more entertaining to do. Quite pleased with these cranes. I think they really sort of add a lot of detail to the dock scene, and they kind of really cement the fact that it is a dock. And then just a range of other bits and pieces. We've got a little bit of a parcels filling area here, so like those 50-foot coaches can be pushed down into here, and there's just various bits and bats that are waiting to be loaded and taken on. So I hope you've enjoyed a little bit of a run around and looking into some details. If there's a particular area that you've seen and you think, oh, I'd like to have a bit of a closer look, ask in the comments. It can happen. Just in case you wonder, obviously these two blacked out areas, well, that's really for access for those inevitable derailments, because they're always going to happen when you can't reach, and track cleaning and things like that. I did toy with the idea of actually doing a removable section in there with more scenery on, and I think in this incarnation of layout, I don't think that's actually going to work. One thing I actually will show, which I don't think I did before, is the red button. What on earth could that possibly do? Well, you can't have aeroplanes without an aeroplane noise. At the moment, that is still the sound of the hunters, so I'll have to track down a sound for the Harriers and get something appropriate there. So, I say, hope you've enjoyed it. Make any comments you like, as long as they're nice. If you're going to say anything rude, I'll get deleted as always. But thank you very much for watching. Huge thanks for all the many subscribers. We've gone well past 1,000 now on subscribers, which I am quite surprised at, because it's only me doing my model railway and doing some daft videos. Keep liking and sharing as well. The whole idea is just to inspire people and have some positivity in the hobby, because I think we're all getting a bit fed up with the negative naysayers about whatever it might be in the hobby. Is this going bankrupt? Is that not working? Why are they doing this? I don't care. Let's play some trains. So thank you very much for watching. Do look after yourselves, and I shall see you on the next video. Happy modelling.